Hello and welcome to the BuildASoil YouTube channel. Today we've got FAQ number 3, and I've got the questions loaded up on the computer. A little different than normal because I'm out of town. If you follow along, you know that my wife Gwen had a hip surgery and we're in recovery here in Denver. But I still wanted to follow through with the YouTube series while we're gone, especially if I can do an FAQ. I've not looked at them yet. I just pulled up the PDF on the computer and started the camera. So let's jump into it. Thanks for watching. Here we go. FAQ number 3. All right, Julianne says, what's the best way to store seeds? That's a really good question. I'm not an expert as far as seed storage. So even though I keep a lot of seeds, I just do it in my particular method, and I'll explain why I do it this way. You can research it for yourself. I've heard some people just keep their seeds in a drawer, and I think that that's likely to cause some issues. They do store better when they're cold, and this slows the microbial process, and it also kind of keeps them in stasis. I know some people put theirs in the freezer, but some people have mentioned to me that that can expand the moisture that might be within the seed if it's not perfectly dried. And so the safe bet would be to use the refrigerator, not the freezer. So that's what I do. On top of that, keeping moisture out would be of concern. Where I live in Colorado, it's pretty dry, but I do make sure that the seeds are dry. A lot of times the seed manufacturer will keep them in a really dry vessel with some rice or some silica beads or anything like that to keep the moisture down. You can also use silica packs, but the idea is to keep them very cool and free from moisture, and they should last a really long time. Of course, keeping them that way is really good. When I do want to start the seeds, I tend to pull the pack out of the fridge, and that kind of mimics the springtime, thaw that happens after winter, and then the seeds will germinate. And I'm not sure if that actually helps anything or not, but it makes logical sense to me. And so that's how I keep my seeds. You can use special vials and rice or desiccant and go a little bit weird with your own seeds that you make as far as storing those properly. But when you buy seeds, they're normally dry in a pack, so popping those in the fridge is an easy way to go. The other consideration while I'm answering this question is some people will actually make a spreadsheet of the seeds that they buy, the date that they buy them, or they'll write the date on the pack, and then they know, like, how old are these getting? Then they can navigate their spreadsheet and see, are there any that I should just pop to make sure that they're not getting too old? That's a great way to go. Not everybody wants to nerd out with a spreadsheet, but when you buy a lot of seeds, little things like that can help. Otherwise, just grouping them maybe into baggies with a date on it and putting them away so that they're organized by breeder or whatever makes sense to you might be some good options. Let's go to the next question. Get Down says, can you add wetting agent with compost tea? Why or why not? This is a great question. So specifically with compost tea, when I first started learning about this, Microbe Man, Tim Wilson, was really helpful in answering a lot of the questions on the forums. And it seems that most people were really scared to kill all the microbes within the tea. And that's what led to a lot of these questions. So as far as a wetting agent with the compost tea, a lot of times like a yucca, it's got sugars in it that actually feed those microbes, and I don't think it's a problem. I do think that the wetting agent actually helps some of those microbes move around in the soil when it's added to the soil. And so I think that adding it towards the end when you're done brewing before you distribute the tea would be a great idea. I don't think it would be a problem at all. I think that the small amount of saponins would not be harmful to the biology, and I think it could help deploy that biology throughout the soil so that it could do its nutrient cycling job and achieve those benefits. Conversely, I don't think it's required. So if you brew a good compost tea, a lot of times there's going to be a little bit of foaminess there anyways. And like if you add a little alfalfa to it or something, there's going to be some saponin. And so it's not like you have to add a wetting agent. I just want to make that clear. You don't have to buy any of these products. As far as wetting agents go, it seems to be that in container gardening, it's one of those really easy adds that make a big difference, because the most important thing about living soil is that the moisture is right. If the moisture is not right, then you're not getting the nutrient cycling and uptake, and that's where you can lead to problems. Adding a wetting agent can help with that, and it's not really a problem. So Dad's Tent says, question, is it normal for your plants to be drooping every day around the same time, like 5 hours before lights off, every day like clockwork? Yes and no. I think that when things happen routinely, it means that it's normal. Whether that's a desired result or not, I'm not positive. And so let's talk about it real quick. Typically, when we start to measure the DLI, we realize that the plants can only use a certain amount of light during the day. And so if you're running your lights at a really potent level, and you're noticing that in the number of hours that you're running at that par or that light intensity, maybe it's over the recommended DLI, whether it be seedling or flowering, there's different kind of recommendations there. And if you're overdoing it, the plants can kind of shut down a little bit early because they've already been trickle charged. They've already filled their batteries for the day. There was no clouds, it was perfect lighting, and now they don't really require any more of that energy. So that's one thought. The other one is there anything else that is happening consistently that makes sense? Like, is your particular container size fairly small and they're running out of moisture at the same time every single day? And could you benefit from adding a second round of moisture that would keep them prolonged with turgor and processing? Because to me, if they're drooping a little, that means that for whatever the reason is, they're not trying to shape themselves to absorb every little bit of light, which means they're shut down for some reason. And I've noticed some genetics kind of do this. So maybe if they're all the same genetic and they're just going through their little cycle, maybe that's how that one goes. I will say that through experience, you're going to notice reasons why this may be occurring, but look to what consistently is happening. Is it the consistent amount of light being too much, so they shut down? Is it consistently that the water's not enough, so it shuts down? And if you can't pin it down and everything looks good, then file it in the mental notes and see if it happens again. And I think you'll find the answer eventually here. So hopefully it helped. Thanks for the question. Next question. TG says, I recently moved and now I have well water, which has a lot of iron and manganese in it. Can I use RO water for my living soil, or would I need to add something back to the RO water like CalMag? Or add a gallon of the well water to say 5 gallons RO water mixed? These are really good questions. I think that the best way to answer this is to send it off for a water sample to Logan Labs. And the reason why I say that is when you've got well water, I'm guessing that you're saying it's high in iron, and it's also, what does it say, higher in manganese, because you probably have a test showing that. Or maybe the homeowner mentioned it to you. Either way, if you do a full water test, just get a water bottle, like a plastic one, and fill it up with your water, rinse it first, send it to Logan Labs. They'll do a good analysis and you can really find out what's going on. And then you can research your particular water to see, should I be diluting it? Should I not use it at all? Right away, if you're on well water, there are other concerns besides the iron and manganese. I don't think that having a ton of iron and manganese in there is likely. If it's palatable and doesn't smell weird and is generally good well water, I think you'd probably be fine with the trace minerals that are in there. But RO water, to answer your question in a different way, I don't think RO water would be a problem. I would rather just filter the water. But if you're concerned that the well water has some sodium or has some things that are just not going to be filtered out by the regular filter, then using an RO water would definitely eliminate all of that concern. I don't like RO because it's wasteful. It doesn't have a 100% use. It diverts the dirty water and you have some waste there, which you can use, obviously, for other reasons. And it's really slow. I also feel like it can be leaching, so to speak, but we're not running excessive amount of water through our living soil beds. So realistically, don't overthink this one. You can use RO. You could probably use some RO and mix a little well water in. But to be sure, you could send it to Logan Labs. It's not much money. You'd know a lot better. You'd know a lot more about your water specifically. And then with your test in hand, the research that you can now do would be very specific to your water instead of general, and I think you'll get a better result that way. Otherwise, you don't want to deal with any of it. RO is totally fine. It's not like you can't use RO, but because it's wasteful and expensive, a lot of times we tell people you don't need to do that. Just filter the water, you'll be good to go. You are correct though, well water can present some problems without proper testing where maybe better just to use RO. One way to know for sure is to grow around and see what happens. You can use RO on all your plants except for maybe one and see what you notice. So many ways to do that. Really good question. So Andy says, so for the smaller growers that use a 2x4 tent, this is good. I really want to do a 2x4 tent grow. I think a lot of people could benefit from having their own herb basically for very low price, very low effort in a 2x4 tent. Normally I use 5 gallons and would like to do a no-till and still maximize yield in the space. What would you recommend? A 10 gal, 15 gal, or something else? Well, a 2x4, I mean, 4 feet wide, 2 feet, you could easily put 2 15 gals, maybe even 2 30 gals if you really wanted to, but I like to have a little bit of airflow around the container. So 2 15 gallons would be perfect. You know, another alternative, I know it's not full no-till, and I struggle with the differences between these two, is an earth box. In a small space, earth boxes crush yield. You just put the soil in, put the water down the tube, it eliminates a lot of the learning curve, and it produces phenomenal quality. So I'd say 2 earth boxes in there, kind of cockeyed, could work really, really well. However, the 15 to 20 gallon container would probably fit in that space very, very well. Either way you go, I don't think you're going to have any issues. I think you're going to be really happy with increasing the soil size. It'll blow your mind, the difference in results you get going from a 5 gallon to a 20 gallon. It's going to make you feel like a pro because the plants are going to be healthy. You're going to get a really good yield. I would just say make sure to manage your expectations, because if you end up vegging them a little too long, they're going to fill up that space in a big container and in an earth box. So flip slightly early. Train the plants if they get out of control and report back with what happens. Either way though, earth box or a 15 to 20 gallon, 2 of them would be perfect for that setup. All right, let's see. Winters says, hello, can I use decomposed pine needles as a medium substitute for peat moss in a living soil recipe? No. I will just say no because you're not going to get the same results at all. They're nowhere near the same. The peat moss is a very ancient decomposed material, where the decomposed pine needles are going to be very acidic, very different in structure, and I think that it would require me doing a test, meaning I'd have to mix it into a soil recipe, send that to the lab, and see how that interacted and how it affected the pH and what I needed to do to build soil. Now, is it impossible to use? No, I think you could use anything, but I would imagine if it wasn't fully decomposed, it would be robbing nitrogen, it would be acidic, and I'm not saying that it's not doable. I'm just saying it's so different from what peat moss offers. I would think that it would be a different formulation of recipe, so be careful. Try it at varying percentages if you'd like to, and plant a plant into it. Otherwise, sending it to the lab is how I would do it to speed up that process. Let's say 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 samples of whatever you're willing to spend, and take your common recipe that you know would work really well, very simple, maybe just the base without the nutrients and minerals, and add in the new component at varying percentages and send it to the lab and see how it affects the recipe. That tells you a lot. Otherwise, like I said, trying to grow plants in it will also teach you a lot. But for those that are listening, I don't have enough experience with decomposed pine needles as a medium to say that you can substitute it. Something tells me it would not perform well at all. Good question, though. I appreciate the question. We have a soil recipe that we offer online we just made. We've been trying to do it for years, but we send it to the lab, and I think this one's going to work well. It's a pit moss recipe, which is a peat-free medium. It's like recycled paper. And it gets hot. We put a local, organically fed, free-range chicken manure pellet that's local. We don't have a ton of it, but we use that to offset the carbon from all of that input, which I suspect the pine needles might be similar and that they rob a lot. But it really got hot. You can check out that soil. It's our pit moss living soil. You can check it out at BuildASoil.com. That recipe is available, and that might scratch that itch. But as far as using your local resources, I encourage it. You're just going to have to do some testing. All right, so next one. Nick, I was wondering if there's a good organic way to get rid of thrips, or is it a complete loss? Good question. Thrips are generally pretty easy, meaning they don't cause a ton of damage. Like if you've got an outdoor grow and your plant is really healthy, it's very likely to see, like in Colorado, you're going to see a little bit of the western flower thrip, and it's usually doesn't decimate the crop whatsoever. It doesn't cause any problems, especially when you're going in living soil and you have other plants around. Like, they're not going to just decimate your plant like they would in a hydro grow or something that gets just overtaken. That being said, there's a couple of processes that you can attempt. Now, the normal BuildASoil way is to have 2 or 3 organic products that you like and that you trust, and to rotate them. And if you notice something active, I would defoliate problem leaves, I would clean up the plant, and I would actively foliar spray every single day. Note that thrips will be some of their life cycle in the soil surface, so you can add other products to see how they help as far as spraying the soil surface, so that you don't just wait a couple weeks and now they kind of restart the process again. So learning about the type of pest you're dealing with helps. The bulletproof version that most organic growers go to is something that's not approved for cannabis use for a commercial grow. And I believe it's because of misuse of the product, not because of danger. So for the home grower, we often recommend using spinosad. It's a normal biological product. It's totally natural. And when you use it, it affects the life cycle of the thrip and some other pests, but it works so well. Typically, if you were to buy Captain Jack's dead bug at the local garden store, just go down the street and buy it. You can use a little bit of that product according to the recipe, but you spray the soil surface, you spray the plant, and you won't see a thrip again. Maybe if you don't have a good sprayer and you don't have good coverage, you might want to do it 2-3 times just to make sure. But typically, people that use spinosad, Coot turned me on to it back in the day. It's like the organic nuclear bomb. It just wipes out the gut of the thrip and they're gone. And then after that, you'll see all of your predator mites are still there and rove beetles, and it seems to just completely eliminate the issue. Otherwise, I would use our EM5, I really like, just as a plant cleaner to get the leaves clean so all the thrip are gone, and then rotate 2 or 3 different normal organic products. Another one that people use is the Dr. Zymes. And so I'm not saying just to use one, but if you rotate 2 or 3 of these organic products, a lot of times you can either keep it completely eliminated or you can keep it so reduced that it's just not a problem. The rule of thumb with organics is we don't want to cause more problem than the pest is. Thrips is one of those that if you're able to keep it at bay, you usually won't cause a very big problem. So hopefully that helps answer your question. It's definitely not a complete loss. Okay, KP, next question. KP says, thanks again. I was really intrigued by the 3.0 triggered before the light recipe. It's only a theory, but do you think it could be because of the available P and having more P? The plants look incredible. Our prayers going out to you. thank you. I think that the reason why you said our prayers are going out to you is because I'm spending some time here with my wife after her hip surgery. You'll be happy to know that she's doing really, really well. Obviously, it's terribly painful and she's not very mobile. I have to help a lot, but as far as recovery goes, I think she's on the really doing well side. Now, as far as your question about the 3.0, I don't think it had anything to do with the soil. In fact, I think one of the other ones that triggered, I'd have to go back, but I don't think it had anything to do with the soil. It is totally possible that a little bit more P availability could cause that, but the light soil has great P availability. It doesn't have as much, but because we're not loading as much, it has a slightly lower pH typically when we test it, and that makes the availability of the P slightly higher right out the gate. And so that's kind of interesting to note. But I don't think it has to do with the soil in this case. I do think it has to do more with the size of the seedling in the cup hitting the bottom and not really getting root bound, but kind of causing that alarm for the autoflower. And that, I think, is what really triggered things differently. And main reason I say that is in the two soils that were the same, you can see a big reaction that's different. Soil's the same, one triggered, one didn't. And I think it's based on the size of the plant when we transplanted. Of course, that's just my gut feeling, and that's what I'm sharing with you. But that was a really good question. Okay, this is the last question of FAQ number 3. I really appreciate you watching along. I really enjoy doing these, so much so that I'm doing it here in Denver just to make sure that we keep it going. And I got to tell you, I'm itching to get back. I'm like, I hope the plants are okay. I've seen photos of them. They look really good. The crew's doing a great job, but I have been here 2 weeks at this point, and I'm coming back next week. And I'm just itching to get back, to touch the plants, to transplant them, to get this grow off and running. So thank you for watching these FAQs. Last question, here we go. E says, as always, love the info and thank you. Thank you, appreciate it. So when you're gone, are we gonna have to wait 2 weeks? Laugh out loud. You're my coffee and I cannot do without. Laugh out loud. That's great. Well, I've got my coffee and I promise that you won't have to wait 2 weeks. We did record some content before I left, so you're gonna see those drop as per normal. Unfortunately though, instead of me having someone record an episode while I was gone, I felt like it would be best to just wait till I get back to really update the grow. So while you're not waiting 2 weeks, there will be a 2-week gap in documentation. And I'll do kind of a catch-up episode where I discuss the photos along the way, what happened while I was gone, and then of course we're gonna immediately get back in and show you what the plants look like after that big defoliation, how long it took to get there as far as the timeline, and then we're gonna show transplanting and kicking this grow off. Can't wait to see the autoflowers, to see what they look like. I feel like I've almost missed out on that whole run, even though it's only been a couple weeks. They just go so quickly. Thank you for the last question. That was easy, and we'll close it at that. This is our way to reach out, to pick questions from the videos, and really make sure that we're interacting with you, answering these questions just like I would if you're my friend and we're sitting here next to each other just talking. Thanks, as always. I appreciate you. Like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and until next time, I'll see you guys on the next BuildASoil video.